The man who bought the railroads, Cornelius Vanderbilt's ruthless rise. Imagine one man controlling so much of America's transportation system that traveling without paying him a dime was nearly impossible. By the time Cornelius Vanderbilt was at his peak, he had amassed a fortune so large, estimated at over $100 million by the 1870s, that it dwarfed the U.S. Treasury's annual budget. He was a kind of man who didn't just compete in business. He crushed, bullied, and bored his way to the top, leaving rivals in the dust and carving his name into the bones of America's infrastructure. But Vanderbilt didn't start as a Wall Street titan. His story began in the dirt and sweat of a working-class family on Staten Island. Born in 1794 to a poor farmer and boatman, young Cornelius was restless, ambitious, and by many accounts, stubborn to the point of being unbearable. He had little patience for books, dropping out of school by the age of 11. Instead, he preferred working the waters around New York Harbor. At just 16 years old, Vanderbilt borrowed $100 from his mother to buy a small boat, promising to repay her, and legend has it, he rowed her to church for an entire year's interest. With that boat, he started ferrying goods and passengers between Staten Island and Manhattan, charging cheaper rates than competitors. His nickname became the Commodore, a title he would carry until his death. The early 1800s were not a kind or forgiving era for small entrepreneurs. Larger companies dominated ferries and shipping lanes, and corruption was rampant. Yet Vanderbilt had a weapon few could match: sheer audacity. He would undercut prices, work longer hours, and even physically intimidate rivals. By the 1820s, he wasn't just a boatman. He was a shrewd businessman who understood how to exploit loopholes and opportunities in America's expanding transport economy. When steamboats emerged, he saw them not as a threat but as a tool. Working under the powerful shipping magnate Thomas Gibbons, Vanderbilt helped break the monopoly that had been strangling New York waters, proving himself as both a fearless operator and a cunning strategist. But boats were just the beginning. By the 1840s and 1850s, Vanderbilt expanded into ocean steamships, controlling routes to California during the gold rush. Imagine tens of thousands of people desperate to strike it rich, all funneled through transport lines he either owned or influenced. He was pulling in millions annually, and while rivals thought he was just another shipping baron, Vanderbilt had already set his sights on something bigger: railroads. The railroad boom of the mid-19th century was chaotic, messy, and filled with speculation. Railroads were the arteries of America's new economy, linking farm to cities, factories to ports, and raw materials to industries. Vanderbilt understood one crucial truth: whoever controlled the rails controlled the nation's economic heartbeat. In the 1860s, he sold most of his shipping empire and began buying up railroad stock. At first, many laughed. Why would a 70-year-old boatman sink his fortune into shaky rail ventures? But Vanderbilt wasn't gambling. He was consolidating. One by one, he took over key lines like the New York and Harlem Railroad, then the Hudson River Railroad, and finally, the New York Central. By the late 1860s, he had stitched them into a single, powerful system that dominated transport into and out of New York City. His strategies were ruthless. If a rival railroad refused to sell, Vanderbilt would cut off its access to crucial terminals or slash fares so low they bled money until they begged for a merger. He wasn't above manipulation, either spreading rumors, using political connections, or squeezing competitors through the stock market. During the infamous Erie War of 1868, Vanderbilt tried to corner the stock of the Erie Railroad, battling against crafty schemers like Jay Gould and Jim Fisk. For once, Vanderbilt was outmaneuvered. They printed fraudulent stock certificates to dilute his holdings, but even that didn't cripple him. If anything, it fueled his determination to control the industry with an iron grip. Of course, Vanderbilt's empire didn't come without controversy. Workers often despised him, calling him cold and tyrannical. He crushed small operators, leaving families bankrupt. His wealth inequality was staggering. While the Boers toiled for a few dollars a week, Vanderbilt was living in a mansion, casually moving millions as if they were pennies. Politicians feared him because he could sway markets with a single decision. To the public, he was both admired and hated, a symbol of the robber baron class that would come to define the Gilded Age. By the time he died in 1877, Vanderbilt had transformed American business. He left $95 million to his family, the largest fortune ever amassed in the United States at that time. To put it in perspective, that's equivalent to billions today and far more concentrated than what most European aristocrats ever controlled. His legacy, however, was mixed. On one hand, he built the backbone of America's modern transportation system. The railroads he consolidated became the foundation for nationwide commerce, allowing goods, people, and capital to move faster than ever before. On the other hand, he embodied a form of capitalism that was raw, merciless, and often destructive to those who couldn't keep up. What drove Vanderbilt? Some say it was money, pure and simple. Others argue it was power, the thrill of crushing rivals and proving his dominance. He wasn't a philanthropist like Andrew Carnegie or John D. Rockefeller would later claim to be. In fact, Vanderbilt donated little of his wealth, aside from an initial gift to found Vanderbilt University in Tennessee. For him, wealth was not a means to uplift society. It was proof of his superiority in the cutthroat game of business. Looking back, Vanderbilt's life offers a stark lesson. Ambition can build empires, but it can also breed fear, resentment, and inequality. He left behind not just railroads and riches, but also the blueprint for both the greatness and the greed of American capitalism. Whether you see him as a visionary or a villain, there's no denying that Cornelius Vanderbilt changed the rules of the game. And maybe that's a real takeaway. In every era, there are people like Vanderbilt, those willing to push boundaries, bend rules, and take risks others wouldn't dare. Sometimes they build nations. Sometimes they break them. More often than not, they do both. If you enjoyed this story, leave a money bag in the comments.